Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss a report of some comments made by Tory MPs who seem to be a little bit concerned with Sunak's apparent lack of awareness of the party's main electoral issues, and how one in particular pointed to a basic organisational problem which will make it incredibly difficult for them to win the general election, that even the polls suggest they're going to lose. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So there's an article in The Guardian, quotes some Tory MPs expressing a bit of a gloomy attitude in the wake of the disastrous local election results and looking ahead to an equally bleak general election next year. I'll put a link in the description below, but the relevant bits are towards the end of the article. Now, it's worth pointing out, of course, a few Tory MPs making comments like this doesn't necessarily reflect the general mood of the parliamentary party. It could just be a few MPs who were never fans of Sunak in the first place, or of those who were but believed he could deliver miracles, you know, when the best that was realistic was simply moving away from the gaffes and scandals of the Johnson era. It may well be that most Tory MPs have looked at last results and gone, yeah, this is fine, no problem, carry on Sunak, me old China. David Davis was being interviewed earlier this week. He suggested that he thought the results would be worse. So he was fine with it. I thought it would be way worse than that. I don't believe this for a second. I do believe that Tory MPs were expecting to say that. They were absolutely expecting to go out and say, well, the results were much better than we thought they would be. But that's when they were claiming they would lose 1,000 seats, but privately thought they would lose much fewer. In the end, they lost even more. Now, I don't remember David Davis, when the Conservative Party, when Greg Hands, the Tory party chair and the organiser of their campaign, was saying, we expect to lose 1,000 seats. I don't remember seeing reports of David Davis going, no, we're going to lose about 1,500. You know, what's happened here? The whips handed out the lines for Tory MPs to use. Look, you know, when they come out, we're saying we're going to lose 1,000 seats, right? But we actually think we're going to lose 600. So go out next week, do your interviews and say, well, actually, the results were much better than we thought they would be. So actually, it's a win. And what's happened is the whips haven't given the MPs the updated lines to use because they haven't thought about what they need to be, because it's all gone a bit pear-shaped. So the unthinking puppets are still using the old lines. But after a weekend of coronation distractions, when Tory MPs needed Sunak to step up and to do something to show he was getting the party in business for next year, what did he do? Took a private helicopter to carry out a journey which would have taken about an hour on the train. With Labour landing blows on the out-of-touch nature of the richest MP to ever enter Parliament, this may not have been the smartest move. It was, of course, justified in terms of Sunak's busy schedule, but that doesn't wash for me, because the helicopter trip wasn't for a meeting. He wasn't going somewhere for a meeting or a fact-finding excursion to talk to people. It was a photo opportunity. It was a publicity stunt to announce his plans to get pharmacists to pretend to be doctors. So it was an expensive trip to announce a bad policy. And even if it were a good policy, if his diary was that crowded, he could have made the announcement in London. He could have gone to a pharmacy in London, or just made the announcement from Downing Street if he's that busy. It's not like, as I say, he hung around to answer questions. He actually ran away. There were journalists wanting to ask questions. He ran away from them. As soon as he went there to do a photo opportunity and then hightailed it away back. But one comment stood out for me in this article. It quotes a Tory MP as saying that the local election campaign was a shambles. They said that there was no coherent message, which was absolutely true. But also that there wasn't even a proper launch event. Now, again, this was true. And I said at the time, it's quite embarrassing. See, when the Liberal Democrats had their election launch and Labour did theirs in the same week, the Tory press asked the Conservatives, so when's yours going to be? We've seen the Lib Dems launch. Labour are doing theirs tomorrow, whenever it was. When are you doing yours? Only to be told by Conservative media office that they'd already done it. It happened the week before. Nobody knew. Not even the Tory media knew, because they hadn't been told about it. They just had this launch. There was no coverage in the media because the media didn't know it was happening. I mean, how badly organised can you be? But there was another MP saying, there was a lack of volunteers to get out and about. Now, this is really serious for them. Very serious problem if they don't address it. Because it's possible that the Conservatives didn't get many activists out canvassing for the local elections because the party leadership made no effort to marshal them, to turn them out. See, what happens is normally in a campaign, you know, you've always got activists, God bless them, who'll go out for their party, knocking on doors, you know, and what they have to put up with, activists of any party, by the way, and they're doing it for free. They're volunteers, and but what really gets them out and really fired up is if they're going around with someone from their party, a big name in their party. That's what gets them turned out. That's what happens in an election when you're asking these people not just to go and knock on doors a couple of times a month or something like that, but every day. Can you really wear your shoe leather out every day? But given the lack of big name Tory MPs that were doing the rounds, it was perhaps understandable that the volunteers felt equally apathetic. Well, if the MPs can't be bothered, why would we? You know, perhaps during the general election campaign, if MPs show they can be bothered, it will inspire more of their activists. Or maybe they don't fancy wearing out good shoe leather on a lost cause. You know, they can throw money at a slick campaign next year, but if they can't marshal a large number of volunteers to carry that message to the doorsteps, they are at a disadvantage. The importance of getting people out to canvass for your party can't be understated. And if Conservative activists aren't up for the fight next year, either because they're onto a hiding for nothing, and it's really hard to motivate yourself for that, or because they can't bring themselves to give up so much time for a party that isn't delivering, then they're in trouble. And the infighting won't help as well. Jacob Rees-Mogg is currently still spitting his dummy out over the way his precious retained EU law bill is being gutted, even though I don't think the rest of us have got much to cheer about, because it still means rules and regulations being removed without any real public scrutiny. It's just not as many as it was going to be. But they're all still being removed without any serious scrutiny. For example, there are some workers' rights up for the chop. But that's not enough for Moggy. And the constant attacks of Brexit betrayal, that can have an impact on Conservative supporters as well. The pro-EU Conservatives are already unimpressed with the government for not only delivering an unnecessarily and undemocratic hard Brexit, but also for delivering it in the most incompetent manner possible. But if the pro-Brexit Conservatives are also unhappy because they've been convinced that the failure to deliver it all means we've just left with all the downsides and none of the benefits, then Sunak finds himself losing the confidence of all sides. And it doesn't matter that most voters don't think Brexit is an issue worth voting for at the moment, with bigger problems demanding their attention. But activists are being asked a lot of during campaigns. The unnamed MP who complained about the lack of volunteers said, and I quote, "We're an ageing party, we're a shrinking party, and every time we lose 1,000 councillors, the problem gets worse." And this is both a short and long-term problem for them. There are a lot of miles put in by people canvassing, and during an election campaign, you really want them to do it every day they can, you know, if they don't mind. The Conservatives may be able to pay for leafleting, although that eats into their campaign budget if they can't get volunteers to do it. But they can't pay for that face-to-face contact with the voters. And what you really want are younger, fitter activists to go out there with all the energy and hope of youth. Doesn't really exist for them, does it? Young Conservatives are all hanging around street corners burning notes in front of homeless people. You know, real people below a certain age, they're not really joining the Conservative Party in large numbers. Some of them will still be fooled into voting Tory, but they're not fired up enough to join them, go out, persuade 1,000 others to vote for them. And although I keep saying that the Conservatives' general election campaign will be technically much better organised than the local elections this year. The local elections this year were run by Greg Hans, who's just an MP and not a very bright one. Next year's, it will be an actual campaign strategist being paid to do so. Isaac Levidow, he ran the 2019 campaign. You know, but the problem is, it doesn't matter how effective he organises that campaign. It may be not unlike having a top general trying to win a battle with Dad's army. Because no matter how well led, if you don't have the troops, you are in trouble. Just another way in which the Conservatives are really up against it next year. There are still things they could do to go out and try and win, although as most of them involve actually governing, I don't think they will. But outside of the fantasy articles in the Tory press that are all talking about how the Conservatives are not in a bad position after all, the reality is they are having a growing number of reasons to suppose that the Conservatives have completely run out of road now. And even that fact will act as a deterrent to those who might otherwise fight for the election win, because it is very hard to motivate yourself to expend your energy on a lost cause. It's much easier to motivate yourself if you think there's even a decent chance of a return on it. But if all Conservative activists have got to face is knocking on doors and facing a load of abuse for the terrible state of the country and then losing the election at the end of it, I can understand why they wouldn't be up for that. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.